The Sith spent 1,000 years plotting to destroy the Jedi. This is the man who actually made it happen. Darth Plagueis' story is a tragic one, because while he learned to keep others alive, he was ultimately betrayed before he could master his own immortality. Yet before his downfall, this Dark Lord unlocked the secrets of life and death through methods no Sith had ever achieved before. However, his journey into darkness began decades earlier with the birth of a child carefully shaped by Sith plans. On the frozen world of Megiddo, around 120 BBY, a boy named Hego Damask was born, a boy who would one day become Darth Plagueis. The Sith had spent years planning his birth, creating someone who could use the Force like no other. Years before Hego's birth, his father, Car Damask, met a mysterious starship designer named Rugus Gnome. While the meeting seemed like a chance encounter, Gnome was secretly the Sith Lord Darth Tenebrous. This smart Bith had planned every detail of their meeting as part of a grand plan that would change the galaxy's future. Therefore, he set up a marriage between Car and a Force-sensitive female Muun who served as his follower. Their goal was simple: to create a child strong in the Force. Although Car had no idea about the manipulation when he agreed to the arrangement, Hego's mother knowingly played her part, seducing Car to create a Force-strong heir. Even before he was born, the conspirators had already set their trap in motion. Because official canon only gives glimpses of Plagueis' story, we've drawn from Star Wars legends to present his full life. The unusual child. Hego's powers proved more dangerous than anyone had expected, and by age 5, he could already use Force manipulation to control others. In one horrifying incident, he used a mind trick to make another child jump to his death. When his father witnessed this act, he became deeply disturbed by what his son had done. However, his mother understood what this meant completely. From the very beginning, she watched him closely, tracking his development and keeping his abilities hidden from the wider world. She acted as Tenebrous' partner in the plan, warning Hego to hide his powers, while knowing that darker schemes were unfolding, since Hego's potential had caught the attention of darker forces. While Tenebrous had monitored the boy from the start, he was waiting for the Force-strong heir his manipulation had produced. When the boy reached the right age, the Sith Lord approached his parents with an offer they couldn't refuse. In exchange for their son, they would receive wealth and advancement beyond their dreams. Therefore, Hego's unsuspecting father handed him over for riches, unaware of Tenebrous' true identity or his wife's role in the plot. Under Tenebrous' teaching, Hego Damask died while Darth Plagueis was born, as the young Muun left Megiddo behind forever, taking his Sith name as an apprentice. Still, Tenebrous proved no traditional mentor, since he taught the young apprentice only what served his own twisted ends. He pushed Plagueis to develop the secret art of midi-chlorian manipulation while withholding crucial knowledge about the dark side's deeper mysteries. What Plagueis didn't realize was that his master had a dangerous plan. Tenebrous secretly saw the young Muun only as a tool for his own eternal life, viewing him not as a successor, but as a way to unlock immortality's secrets. Moreover, unknown to his student, Tenebrous broke the rule of 2 by secretly training another student, making Darth Venomous his backup plan. Ancient Sith records showed that as the young apprentice became more powerful every year, he began sensing that his master was keeping important secrets from him. Still, he had no idea about the second apprentice, or Tenebrous' ultimate plan to use him as a mere stepping stone. In 67 BBY, everything changed when Plagueis finally seized his chance for freedom deep within the mining cavern of Baldemnik. During what appeared to be a routine surveying mission, Plagueis saw the cavern's ceiling begin to collapse. Therefore, Plagueis used the chaos to his advantage by causing more rocks to fall and crush his master. As Tenebrous lay trapped and dying beneath the rubble, his apprentice personally snapped the Bith's neck with his bare hands. Only after killing Tenebrous did the Muun discover the shocking truth about Darth Venomous. This betrayal from beyond the grave filled Plagueis with rage, reinforcing his belief that he could trust no one completely. He then defeated and captured Venomous alive for horrific experiments. The Sith studied the Bith's body through increasingly intensive tests until, around 42 BBY, he began the most terrible phase, repeatedly killing and reviving Venomous to unlock Death's secrets, continuing until the tortured body couldn't take it anymore. Thus, the student had become the master, and now he could pursue the one thing that terrified him most, his own inevitable death. Conquering death itself. With Tenebrous dead, Darth Plagueis emerged from the shadows as the new Dark Lord of the Sith. He then took on the public identity of Hago Damask II, a respected Muun businessman and political moneyman who commanded vast wealth through Damask Holdings. Having inherited his father's financial empire, which gave him ready access to powerful people across the galaxy, he used this position to advance his goals. While posing as this influential banker, Plagueis became a trusted ally to politicians and royalty, all while quietly advancing the Sith grand plan that had been developing for centuries. Through Damask Holdings, he subtly influenced major institutions like the Banking Guild and even the Trade Federation's leadership. By day, he ruled the highest circles of galactic finance as a powerful banking tycoon. By night, he was a Sith Lord, manipulating events to weaken the Republic. Every handshake brought him closer to ultimate power. The Dark Lord made alliances with crime groups like the Hutt Cartel and Black Sun, using their resources to eliminate threats across the galaxy's underworld. Still, more than political power or revenge against the Jedi, Plagueis wanted what had escaped generations before him: living forever. His single fear of losing power drove him to master midi-chlorian control, learning to create life and to prevent death through methods no other Sith had successfully achieved. Therefore, influencing midi-chlorians to create life and prevent death became his greatest focus. Plagueis used his cruel experiments with the trapped Darth Venomous to push beyond what the Force normally allowed. He learned to heal deadly wounds and make lifespans longer through his research. He could even bring those who had recently died back to life through careful control of their life force. However, what Plagueis didn't realize was that the Force itself was watching. Eventually, Plagueis came to believe that this Force energy kept a careful balance. His actions might cause an equal and opposite reaction. This theory would prove correct, as the Force was preparing to strike back against his extreme control of life. Old Sith writings show that in 42 BBY, the Dark Lord did a ritual alongside his student. The ritual was so terrible that it seemed to make the Force angry. Working together, Plagueis and his student tried to control the Force energy completely, trying to tip the balance toward darkness forever. The experiment seemed to work at first, giving them an understanding of life unlike anything seen before. Years later, Plagueis' student would recall how he and his master, together, learned the dark side's final secrets. However, the Force's response was fast and final. Plagueis sensed that the Force itself may have struck back. Shortly afterward, a problem appeared in the form of a fatherless boy on a distant desert world. Their actions had caused the Force to create a Jedi's predicted chosen one who would fix things. Years before this terrible ritual, Plagueis had realized he would need a smart and sneaky partner, someone younger and more skilled with politics who could carry out their plans on the galactic stage. So the Dark Lord had begun searching for someone who could handle both politics and the dark side with equal skill. The perfect weapon. Fate delivered exactly what Darth Plagueis had been seeking. On the peaceful world of Naboo in 65 BBY, the Dark Lord was conducting business in the royal court. Posing as the influential banker Hago Damask, he encountered a young nobleman whose potential immediately caught his attention. Palpatine was the heir of House Palpatine, a teenager burning with ambition. Palpatine's natural political instincts and talent for reading people marked him as the ideal candidate for Sith training. Gradually, the Master gained Palpatine's trust. He encouraged the young man's resentments against his controlling father and fed his natural lust for power. The Dark Lord presented himself as a mentor who understood Palpatine's true potential, someone who could guide him to the greatness he deserved. His manipulation was subtle yet devastating, playing on every weakness in the proud youth's character while slowly corrupting his moral foundation. But Plagueis' plan reached far deeper than simple corruption. Years of careful tricks finally reached their breaking point. During a fight with his family, Palpatine's held-back rage suddenly exploded. Guided by his mentor's influence and consumed by years of anger, the young nobleman did the unthinkable. He murdered his father and entire family in a single act of violence that changed galactic history forever. the Sith Lord ensured the crime remained hidden, making the family's disappearance look like a tragic accident that would never implicate his new apprentice. That horrific moment severed Palpatine's last ties to his former life. The Master gave him a new identity and purpose. Therefore, Palpatine fully embraced Plagueis as his master and took on the Sith mantle of Darth Sidious. Yet he would continue using his family name publicly as part of their long-term deception. Under Plagueis' teaching, Sidious proved to be everything his master had hoped for and more. He learned not only the techniques of the dark side, but also the art of presenting different faces to various audiences. Sidious could act as a friendly senator to his colleagues, a caring mentor to allies, and a ruthless master to his followers. Each persona was perfectly crafted to achieve his goals while keeping his true nature completely hidden. However, their partnership carried the seeds of its own destruction. The relationship between master and apprentice was built on the Sith rule of two. They worked together toward common goals while both understanding that eventually, Sidious would have to surpass and destroy his master. This tension forced them to continuously adapt and grow stronger. They knew each could be a threat, but they still relied on each other to reach their goals. But neither master nor apprentice could foresee the betrayal that would reshape the galaxy. The Dark Lord recognized that Sidious's greatest strength lay in politics rather than pure force power. With his masters behind-the-scenes support, Sidious began building friendships with key figures across the galaxy. He befriended senators, corporate leaders, and influential nobles, all while keeping his true nature perfectly hidden from even the most perceptive politicians. Their partnership achieved its first major victory in 52 BBY, when Palpatine was elected as Naboo's representative in the Galactic Senate. This achievement required eliminating Naboo's senator, Vidar Kim, through a staged accident to open the seat, a death the Master arranged while Sidious maintained believable innocence. The Legends novel Darth Plagueis confirms that Palpatine was still apprenticed to Plagueis upon entering the Senate, showing their collaboration during these early political years. For the first time in a millennium, a Sith Lord sat within the Republic's government, guided from the shadows by his master. As Sidious's influence grew, so did his independence from his master's direct guidance. He began undertaking missions of his own, some with the Muun's blessing and others in secret. Sidious took particular interest in the galaxy's criminal underworld and the forgotten systems that felt abandoned by the Republic's corruption. During this period, Sidious also acquired his own secret apprentice, named Darth Maul, a young Zabrak trained from childhood as a deadly enforcer, though Sidious viewed him as merely a tool rather than a true Sith heir. Maul's existence represented Sidious's growing confidence, his willingness to prepare for the day when he would have to stand alone against his master. The two Sith Lords started taking bolder steps in their plan. Ancient records tell of secret meetings in which Plagueis, acting as Hugo Damask, and Sidious planted seeds of doubt in Jedi Master Dooku. At the same time, they also pushed his friend Sifo Dyas to act on his visions of war. They were systematically corrupting and manipulating Force users who could serve their purposes when the time came. Yet beneath the surface cooperation, tensions were building. Sidious had learned everything his master could teach him and was beginning to view the cautious approach as a limitation rather than wisdom. His ambitions were growing beyond what even Plagueis had expected. Death of the Deathless. By 32 BBY, chaos threatened to consume the galaxy. Most major problems had been caused by the two Sith Lords working together. Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious spent decades corrupting the Republic, and their hard work was finally paying off. In the Senate, endless debates dragged on. Powerful corporations ignored the central authorities, and the Jedi did not notice the growing darkness. Therefore, for the last step of the grand plan, a galactic war was needed, one that would give the Republic a reason to become more controlling. To make this happen, the Sith Lords built a network of pawns all over the galaxy. All of them were unaware that their actions were serving the Sith's true goal. But everything changed when powerful enemies struck back at them. As the Master's public influence grew through Damask Holdings, so did the number of those who saw him as a threat. By the early 30s BBY, this danger materialized into coordinated assassination attempts. Ex-King Ars Varuna of Naboo, was the most dangerous because he understood how completely the ancient Muun had deceived and destroyed him. Working with allies, including Senator Pack's team, Varuna hired Maladian assassins to kill the banker who ruined his rule. The attack nearly succeeded, cutting Plagueis' throat and forcing him to rely on a breathing apparatus. Sidious arrived in time to fend off the assassins, secretly saving his master's life while maintaining his facade of loyalty. However, this injury would make the Dark Lord vulnerable in ways he never imagined. He wore a respirator after that. The ancient Muun believed constant vigilance was key to cheating death, not knowing this technology would later help cause his downfall. After the attack, the Master became terrified of dying and hardly slept. He used the dark side to keep himself alive for years. The ancient Muun now relied on technology to breathe, and this technological dependence would prove crucial in the years to come. What Plagueis didn't realize was that the galaxy itself was about to test their plans. Sidious was executing increasingly bold operations under his master's guidance. He strengthened ties with systems that felt abandoned by the stagnant Republic, encouraging them to consider more drastic action. The Neimoidians of the Trade Federation proved especially easy to manipulate. They held grudges over taxes and trade rules that Sidious carefully worsened. A long campaign of corruption led to the scheme to blockade Naboo. The Trade Federation claimed they were protesting trade taxes, but the real goal was to create a crisis that would make Palpatine Supreme Chancellor. From the Federation's motives to the Senate's predictable reactions, every part had been planned years in advance. But there was another crucial element the Sith had prepared. Making sure the Republic would have an army when the war finally came required careful planning. The Dark Lord used layers of helpers and his banking guild connections to arrange the funding. He secretly built a clone army for the Republic. Plagueis carefully tricked Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas and played on his real fears about galactic security. This way, Plagueis ensured this massive military force would be built. Consequently, when the time came, the Republic would have soldiers ready. Yet those same soldiers would eventually answer to the Sith when the proper moment arrived. But during the unfolding Naboo crisis, something unprecedented occurred. Reports of a problem reached Plagueis in the Force. A boy named Anakin Skywalker, born without a father on the remote desert world of Tatooine. The Dark Lord immediately recognized the terrible twist. The Force had created a chosen one in response to their actions from years before. A Jedi prophecy had predicted one who would bring balance by destroying the Sith. Therefore, that very weapon of their destruction had arrived. Deeply unnerved by this threat, Plagueis urgently pressed Sidious to ensure the boy would never become a Jedi. Darth Maul's mission on Naboo was specifically designed to eliminate Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi who discovered Anakin. By removing the one Jedi most likely to train the boy, the Sith hoped to prevent their own destruction. The Dark Lord, still recovering from serious injuries and relying on his breathing device, turned his focus more toward his research about living forever. He felt confident enough to imagine stepping into the public eye, perhaps as co-ruler alongside his student in the new era. While Plagueis trusted Sidious to handle their political schemes, he focused on the final goal, never dying through midi-chlorian control. Yet Sidious was growing impatient with his master's vision. He had learned everything the older Sith could teach him about politics and manipulation. Where the master preferred to act from the shadows, Sidious was ready to seize power openly, ruling through strength rather than secrecy. He now saw the ancient Muun more as an obstacle than an ally. But Sidious had no intention of sharing power with anyone. He wanted the throne entirely for himself. Imagining his master stepping into the light as co-ruler filled him with disgust. It strengthened his resolve to eliminate the Dark Lord before those plans could take shape. Both Sith Lords understood that their greatest triumph was close. The invasion of Naboo would set in motion events leading to Palpatine's election as Supreme Chancellor. This would complete a goal the Sith had plotted for a millennium. For the first time since their defeat at Ruusan, a Dark Lord of the Sith would openly hold the reins of galactic power, even if hidden behind a false identity. Therefore, Plagueis quietly oversaw these events as the final test of his grand plan. Everything he had worked toward for decades was finally coming to fruition. As Palpatine's election drew near, Plagueis planned their victory celebration with wine and grand speeches about the future. The Naboo crisis had succeeded perfectly. Chancellor Valorum fell, and the Senate now supported Senator Palpatine. After decades of careful manipulation, the Master's ultimate goal was finally in reach. In an expensive penthouse high above Coruscant, Master and apprentice gathered to celebrate. Plagueis spoke eagerly of their future plans, envisioning a galaxy reshaped by Sith ideals. With unlimited resources now at their disposal, even the final secrets of immortality seemed within reach. Since the attack on his life, Plagueis had never allowed himself to sleep or let his guard down. But as victory finally arrived, the Muun began to celebrate with rare wine, savoring their triumph. This moment of vulnerability would prove more dangerous than Plagueis could imagine. The apprentice had decided long before that night that his master must die. He had learned everything the ancient Muun could teach him and had grown beyond his plans for the future. The Dark Lord sensed nothing amiss as death approached. In the dark chamber, with Coruscant's lights shining below, Sidious struck without warning. Force lightning erupted from his fingertips, overwhelming the unsuspecting Muun. The electrical assault shattered Plagueis' breathing apparatus, leaving him gasping for air. The future Emperor laughed at his dying master with cold satisfaction. All the legendary wisdom had failed to see this betrayal coming. Here was the Sith Lord who had learned to save others from death, yet he could not save himself. All this knowledge of the Force and secrets of life crumbled to nothing when his own apprentice betrayed him. But that betrayal didn't happen in a single night. It was the result of 11 years of deliberate, calculated shaping. The young nobleman from Naboo who first encountered Hago Damask was ambitious but ordinary. What Plagueis built from that raw material was something the galaxy had never seen before, and the process of building it was just as dark as the result. The transformation of Palpatine into Darth Sidious involved methods so calculated and thorough that they produced the galaxy's most dangerous being. Through legends and canon sources, the answer reveals an 11-year process of breaking down his mind and rebuilding him as the architect of the Empire. The story begins not with the Sith, but with a troubled family on Naboo. James Luceno's 2012 Legends novel, Darth Plagueis, introduces Palpatine as the heir to House Palpatine, one of Naboo's noble families. Born approximately 84 years before the Battle of Yavin, the young man grew up in a Lake Country estate surrounded by wealth. However, behind this elegant appearance, his childhood was marked by constant mistreatment. His father, Kosinga Palpatine, was the head of House Palpatine. He was an alcoholic and a failed politician who took out his frustrations on his family. Kosinga had tried for political office and lost. As a result, his bitterness turned him into a harsh and heartless man. The mistreatment was not just physical. Kosinga constantly told his son he was worthless and would amount to nothing. Meanwhile, Palpatine's mother remained unnamed, but her role was clear. She enabled the mistreatment and never stepped in to protect them. The young Palpatine had multiple brothers and sisters, all of whom suffered under their father's anger. Yet the mistreatment triggered something far more dangerous. He began to feel a power growing inside of him, something he could not explain or control. Palpatine was Force-sensitive, though he had built walls to hide his power, perhaps since infancy. This power had been bottled up for 17 years. On Naboo, the Force was not part of everyday life. The planet had no Jedi temple and no Force traditions. For this reason, the young man kept this concealed, knowing only that something made him different, setting him apart from everyone around him. By age 17, Palpatine had reached his breaking point. He was consumed by rage at his family and his own powerlessness. He wanted them gone, and the tension between father and son had been building for years. But what happened next would shatter the family forever. Kosinga Palpatine arrived unexpectedly on Chandrila and intercepted his son during the Legislative Youth Program. Security guards removed the young Palpatine from the Naboo vessel Jafan 3 and brought him to the family starship. His mother and siblings were already aboard. After launch, Palpatine learned he was being taken to Chamel Minor to live with the Grijatis family, placed out of reach of outside influences. The pair fell into a heated argument in the communications room. Kosinga accused his son of disgracing the family, while Palpatine defended himself. As the confrontation escalated, Palpatine's rage finally exploded. In moments of pure fury, he reached out with powers he had kept hidden his entire life. Kosinga was hurled against the bulkhead, and when the injured man tried to escape, the bulkhead buckled inward, driving him to the floor. A guard entered, and Palpatine threw him across the cabin. He ended them all, his father, mother, siblings, and guards, using the Force. Just days after the tragedy, help arrived. A Muun banker named Hego Damask, whom Palpatine had met during the youth program, sent his agents to assist. Damask arranged for the starship's disposal, leaving no evidence behind. Chandrilan and Naboo authorities searched but found nothing, and without evidence, there was no crime. The meeting that followed would change Palpatine forever. Plagueis secured a private cabin for Palpatine aboard the passenger ship Quantum Colossus. When they met, the young man was still shaken by what he had done. He expected support from someone he considered an ally, but instead, Plagueis challenged him. The Muun explained that he had intentionally orchestrated the confrontation. He had come to Chandrila to ensure Kosinga's spies would see them together, wanting to push father and son to a dilemma. Palpatine realized he had been manipulated. Nevertheless, Plagueis explained this was necessary. Before he could reveal certain truths, Palpatine needed to be free from fear of expressing his true nature. Then came the revelation that transformed everything. Plagueis asked if Palpatine had ever learned of the Sith. Palpatine knew little, only that they were a Jedi sect, the result of a family conflict. The Sith were far more than that, Plagueis explained. They were the prodigal offspring, destined to return and overthrow the Jedi. He described them as beings who refused to live by conventional morality, who shaped history rather than merely observing it. Plagueis revealed his true identity. He was not merely a banker, but a Sith Lord. More than that, he explained, just now there was only one Sith, unless Palpatine chose to join him. Plagueis tested Palpatine's abilities during their meetings. He taught the young man basic techniques for sensing through the Force. He showed him how to reach out and feel the living energy around him. He demonstrated powers that seemed impossible. Most importantly, he explained that everything Palpatine had experienced was the Force responding to his emotions. However, the offer that followed came with conditions that would require Palpatine to abandon everything he knew. Plagueis looked at the young nobleman and made an offer. The Muun promised to teach Palpatine everything about the Force. He offered to show him how to use the power that frightened and confused him. He claimed he could transform him into something greater than any Jedi. The offer was tempting beyond measure. Palpatine had spent 17 years feeling powerless despite his family's wealth. Now, someone was offering him real power, the kind that could never be taken away. However, Plagueis made the conditions clear. Accepting this path meant leaving Naboo, abandoning his inheritance, and devoting himself completely to the dark side. With no attachment to his family's legacy and no loyalty to Naboo's traditions, he wanted power more than anything else in the galaxy. As a result, Palpatine accepted Plagueis' offer without hesitation. Months passed between their initial meetings and the next critical moment. During this time, Plagueis taught Palpatine basic Force techniques. He showed him how to hide his abilities from others. He explained the history of the Sith and their long war against the Jedi. He prepared the young man for what was coming. What came next would transform Palpatine completely. Aboard the Quantum Colossus, Plagueis made his final offer. He explained that the dark side was only for those who valued self-determination over all else that existence offered, and that joining would require abiding submission as his only road to salvation. At Plagueis' instruction, Palpatine knelt and pledged to join his destiny forever with the Order of the Sith Lords. Plagueis extended his left hand to touch him on the crown of the head, declaring the pledge complete. From that day forward, Palpatine would be known as Sidious. Yet this was only the beginning of 11 years of brutal conditioning. The training period would span from age 17 to 28. Plagueis would take his new apprentice to multiple worlds, each designed to break him and shape him through the dark side of the Force. The process would be cruel at times and painful, with denial remaining a key factor in Sith training. Every location served a purpose in building the perfect Sith apprentice. On the low-gravity planet Boyant, Plagueis taught him hunting techniques. Sidious learned to become what his master called a predatory swarm, moving silently, stalking prey without detection, and eliminating targets efficiently. He ended the lives of countless creatures during this training, and Plagueis insisted he felt no remorse as they culled the herd, sharpened their skills, and marinated themselves in dark side energy. Following this, the training on Hepori involved combat against battle droids. 200 battle droids, provided by the Techno Union, were deployed against Sidious in a fabricated cityscape. He wielded the lightsaber he had built under Plagueis' guidance as the droids attacked in concentric rings, staggering their assault and triggering bursts at random. Sidious fought for hours, learning to channel his rage into precise strikes while deflecting bolts and destroying the automata one after another. On Cursed, the training revealed how completely the transformation had succeeded. The planet had been reserved for Sith use for 600 years, and indigenous primitives had come to expect the periodic return of sky visitors. Plagueis and Sidious fought against several hundred warriors armed with longbows and metal-tipped lances. They wielded force pikes rather than lightsabers to avoid senseless slaughter, moving across the plain like wraiths and felling opponent after opponent with taps from the stun weapons. When only one warrior remained standing, Plagueis tossed aside his force pike and ignited his crimson blade. He used the force to hurl the warrior to the ground, then opened the primitive's chest cavity with his lightsaber. Reaching inside, he extracted the still-beating heart and raised it overhead as a collective lament rose from the crowds watching on the hillsides. Taking a bite from the organ, Plagueis then passed it to Sidious. Raised in Naboo's refined culture with elegant manners and civilized behavior, Sidious should have recoiled. Instead, he consumed the flesh without hesitation. This marks the completion of his transformation. The refined nobleman from Naboo had become a being willing to do anything for power. During these 11 years, Sidious learned every skill a Sith needed: force lightning, telepathy, manipulation, elimination techniques, lightsaber combat, and force concealment. Each ability was practiced until it became natural. Plagueis demanded perfection, responding to failure with punishment and to hesitation with contempt. The training in force lightning proved particularly significant. Plagueis warned his apprentice that to summon and use lightning properly, he would someday have to be on the receiving end of its power as a means of taking the energy inside himself. Yet combat skills alone would not bring down the Republic. Plagueis understood that true power came not from force abilities, but from controlling the invisible systems that held civilization together. According to Sidious's own writings in the Book of Sith, Plagueis' greatest talent was manipulating what he called the strings that kept the galaxy from degenerating into chaos. Plagueis maintained contact with beings across the galaxy who shaped entire star systems, yet remained unknown to ordinary citizens. He cultivated relationships with leaders from the Intergalactic Banking Clan, executives in the Corporate Alliance, viceroys in the Trade Federation, and even criminal organizations like Black Sun. These were not allies, but useful bureaucrats who could be controlled through greed, ambition, or fear. Most importantly, Plagueis taught Sidious how to view other beings. There were only two categories: those who wielded power and those who existed to serve. Everyone outside the Sith was inferior, and their only value resided in their usefulness. They owed the Sith everything, including their lives, the truth of the universe as Plagueis understood it. This philosophy restructured how Sidious experienced human connection. Where normal beings felt empathy, Sidious learned to feel contempt. Where others experienced guilt, he felt satisfaction. Where people sought genuine relationships, he saw only tools to be used and discarded. The transformation was so complete that Sidious would later write that the weak must be trained to accept their own worthlessness and punished when they failed to serve properly. Plagueis also perfected what Sidious called the art of institutional hiding. Darth Bane had hidden in the shadows, staying unknown. Plagueis went further by hiding in plain sight while wielding institutional power. He taught Sidious that the best disguise was not invisibility, but the appearance of being ordinary, trustworthy, and even weak. People wanted to believe their leaders were like them, so appearing vulnerable generated sympathy, while actual power remained concealed. The lesson would prove essential. Sidious would later spend decades as Senator and Supreme Chancellor, deceiving even Jedi Masters face to face without ever breaking character. He would convince Yoda to send Jedi into danger while appearing to help them. He would dismantle democracy while being praised as its greatest defender. Not once in over 30 years would anyone detect a Sith Lord hiding behind the mask of the concerned public servant. By age 28, Sidious had become everything Plagueis intended, and the galaxy would never know what was coming. Around 56 BBY, Sidious's training finally concluded. By this point, he had mastered every technique Plagueis taught him. He could fight, eliminate targets, manipulate, and deceive without hesitation. More importantly, he had learned to hide his nature completely. This concealment proved perhaps the most critical skill. Plagueis had taught Sidious techniques to hide in plain sight, to be submerged in the unified pattern to which the Jedi were attuned. He would remain visible in the Force, but not as a Sith. Hidden among ordinary life, masked by everyday routines, his true nature would be beyond detection. This ability would prove essential for what came next. In 56 BBY, a Naboo senator named Vidar Kim was eliminated on Coruscant. It turns out that Sidious arranged this. He hired Maladians, a species known for such work, through his first major recruit, Sate Pistage. The operation was clean and professional, leaving no evidence pointing back to Sidious. With Kim gone, Sidious took his place as Naboo's senator. This position suited his goals perfectly. As a senator, he had access to the Republic's political center. This position allowed him to observe the government's inner workings, identify its weaknesses, and build a network of allies and agents to eventually seize control. The transition from Sith apprentice to senator was seamless. Sidious presented himself as a dedicated public servant. He was charming, intelligent, and committed to Naboo's interests. He befriended other senators, joined committees, and worked on legislation, all while studying the Republic's weak points. Remarkably, Sidious even interacted with Jedi without being detected. Ronar Kim, the son of the eliminated senator, was a Jedi Knight. He investigated his father's death and met with Sidious multiple times, while Count Dooku and Sifo Dyas worked with him on political matters. Despite their combined expertise, none of these Jedi Masters detected the Sith Lord hiding in plain sight. However, in 52 BBY, Sidious made a decision that would complicate the rule of two. He traveled to Dathomir, a planet home to the Night Sisters, a group of Force-sensitive women who practiced dark side techniques. Mother Talzin, the Night Sisters' leader, wanted a particular infant male Zabrak for her own purposes, but another Night Sister sought to save the child from that fate. Believing Sidious could protect the boy better than she could, she offered him the infant. Maul's role was never intended to be that of a true Sith apprentice. Sidious already held that position under Plagueis, and according to the rule of two, only one apprentice could exist at a time. Instead, Maul would become something different, a weapon skilled in stealth and combat, to be eliminated when no longer needed. In Legends continuity, Plagueis eventually heard of Maul but tolerated him as a Sith assassin, rather than a true successor, even providing Sidious with the stealth ship to gift to Maul. Plagueis had earlier told Sidious that they would transcend Bane's rule of two entirely, sharing all knowledge without the traditional master-apprentice betrayal cycle. The Muun saw Maul as a useful weapon, not a violation of their partnership. In Canon, however, reference materials suggest Plagueis died before Sidious took Maul as his apprentice, thus preserving the rule of two strictly. With Maul's role clearly defined as that of an assassin, His training focused on combat rather than Sith philosophy. On Mustafar and later at the Orsis Academy, Sidious pushed the young Zabrak to his absolute limits using methods similar to those Plagueis had employed on him. He taught Maul to channel rage and hatred into combat effectiveness. Unfortunately, unlike his own comprehensive education under Plagueis, Sidious never taught Maul political manipulation or long-term strategy. In 42 BBY, 25 years into Sidious's apprenticeship, something unprecedented happened that would tilt the Force itself. This was the most critical event in the entire story. Plagueis and Sidious traveled to a secure location where they could meditate without interruption. They remained there for months, focused entirely on a single objective. Their goal was to influence the Force itself. For thousands of years, the Jedi had maintained balance. The light side was dominant. The dark side existed, but it was contained and controlled. Plagueis and Sidious intended to change that basic reality. They succeeded. They willed the Force to shift and tip irrevocably to the dark side. This was not just a philosophical change. It was a real change to the fabric of reality. The Force itself began favoring darkness over light. The balance that the Jedi had maintained for thousands of years started to collapse. This was not immediate. The shift happened gradually, but once it began, it could not be stopped. The Jedi would eventually sense that something was wrong. However, by the time they noticed, it would be too late to reverse the change. This event was the foundation for everything that followed: the Clone Wars, the fall of the Republic, and the rise of the Empire. The consequences appeared quickly. Immediately after this shift, Plagueis' plans began succeeding at an unprecedented rate. The election of Finis Valorum as Supreme Chancellor in 40 BBY went exactly as planned. Plagueis had been cultivating Valorum for years. Valorum was weak and easily manipulated, which made him perfect for their purposes. Plagueis had also been working with the Trade Federation. He helped them gain power and influence. He arranged favorable legislation. He removed their competitors. He made them dependent on his financial support. In turn, they became tools he could use when needed. Newt Gunray, the Viceroy of the Trade Federation, owed everything to Plagueis and Sidious. However, as Sidious grew stronger, he began to see possibilities his master could not. Growing tension emerged between Plagueis and Sidious during the final years of their partnership. Plagueis was obsessed with achieving immortality through midi-chlorian manipulation. He spent endless hours in his laboratory on Abora, conducting experiments attempting to create life and prevent death. Sidious participated in some of these experiments. He learned the scientific approach to the Force that Plagueis favored. Nevertheless, Sidious's interests lay elsewhere. He cared more about political power than biological immortality. He understood that controlling the galaxy required controlling its institutions: the Senate, the military, the economy, and public opinion. Their different priorities created tension. Plagueis believed that mastering life and death was the ultimate goal. Sidious believed that ruling the galaxy was more important than living forever. These conflicting visions would eventually lead to the inevitable conclusion of their relationship. As seen in the 2005 film Revenge of the Sith, Sidious would eventually tell Anakin Skywalker about his master. The scene takes place at the galaxy's opera house on Coruscant. Sitting in the shadows, Palpatine shares what he calls the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. He explains that Plagueis had such knowledge of the dark side that he could influence midi-chlorians to create life and keep people from dying. Matthew Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith expands on this conversation, revealing additional details about Plagueis' research and abilities. However, both the film and the novelization make one thing clear: Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew. This was his fatal mistake. The death of Plagueis occurred in 32 BBY, on the night before Palpatine's election as Supreme Chancellor. Following a performance at the galaxy's opera house and a celebration dinner, the two Sith Lords retired to Plagueis' penthouse in the Kaldani Spires to prepare for the Senate vote. The Muun was in high spirits, convinced that decades of planning had finally reached fruition. As the evening progressed, they opened bottle after bottle of rare Seleucid wine. Plagueis, who had trained himself to go without sleep for 20 years, allowed himself to relax in celebration of their impending victory. He drank heavily while discussing the grand plan's success, never noticing when his breathing began to slow. In that moment, the apprentice Plagueis had created destroyed him. Without warning, blue force lightning erupted from Sidious's fingertips and struck the Muun's breathing device. Plagueis's eyes snapped open in shock, yet he hesitated to defend himself. He trusted Sidious completely and could not comprehend that his own apprentice would betray him. That hesitation proved fatal. As Plagueis struggled for breath, Sidious revealed the truth. The apprentice had learned all his master's secrets and no longer needed him. Every recent success Plagueis had claimed as his own had actually been Sidious's manipulation. Yinchor, Dorvala, Eriadu, the Neimoidians, Naboo, all of it had been carefully orchestrated by the apprentice while the master congratulated himself on his genius. The rule of two demanded that the apprentice eventually surpass the master, and that moment had finally arrived. Desperately, Plagueis tried to use his midi-chlorian manipulation to save himself, but the techniques that worked on others failed when applied to his own dying body. The irony was absolute. Plagueis had spent decades researching how to prevent death and had discovered techniques that could influence life itself. Yet in that moment, none of it mattered. He died gasping for air, while his apprentice explained that he had been deceived from the very beginning. The being who had broken Palpatine and created Darth Sidious became the first victim of his own success. The next morning, Palpatine was elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. Days later, he traveled to Naboo to congratulate Queen Amidala on her victory over the Trade Federation. Only upon arriving in Theed did he learn that Darth Maul had been killed during the Battle of Naboo. The Zabrak had succeeded in eliminating Qui-Gon Jinn, but Obi-Wan Kenobi had defeated him in turn. The timing seemed significant, as if the dark side itself had demanded payment for Sidious's ascension. When informed of Maul's death, Sidious felt no grief. His reaction was a simple acknowledgement of an expected outcome. The tool had been destroyed, and he would acquire new tools when necessary. This was the important lesson Plagueis had taught him through decades of careful instruction. Everything and everyone was expendable except power itself. The techniques Plagueis used to forge Sidious would persist long after both Sith Lords were gone. The canon novel Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher reveals that Sidious continued Plagueis' work on life manipulation. After his apparent end in Return of the Jedi, his essence survived. The Sith Eternal, a cult of followers on the hidden world of Exegol, worked to resurrect him through cloning. Massive cloning facilities operated on Exegol, where cultists trained in dark side techniques attempted to create a body that could house Sidious's spirit. Many clones failed and were called rejected matter before being disposed of. One strand cast named Dathan survived, but lacked force sensitivity. He eventually escaped, married a woman named Miramir, and had a daughter named Rey. The Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary provides additional details about the Sith Eternal's operations. The cult had been working on Exegol for a generation, maintaining ancient Sith knowledge while building a massive fleet of Star Destroyers. Each vessel was equipped with planet-destroying weapons, powered by enslaved workers and tortured kyber crystals. In the depths of Exegol's citadel, the Sith Eternal cultists chant during their rituals, repeating the name of the Muun Sith Lord over and over. Decades later, Plagueis remains spoken with reverence by those who practice his dark science. This reveals the complete success of Plagueis' methods. He did not just create one powerful Sith Lord, but a system that would outlive both of them. The techniques he taught Sidious for political manipulation became doctrine for the Sith Eternal. The life creation experiments he pioneered enabled the cloning program. The patient, long-term planning he demonstrated shaped the decades-long fleet construction. The breaking of Palpatine was so thorough that the transformation survived decades beyond invisible control through secret bases, systematic use of enslaved labor, patient planning spanning generations, and ruthless treatment of all beings as expendable tools. Even his own granddaughter, Rey, was hunted by agents like Oki of Bestoon, who received orders from Sidious's preserved consciousness while being promised Exegol as a reward. For 30 years, the Sith Eternal built civilization-ending weapons in complete secrecy, creating a system that kept working no matter what happened. The techniques Plagueis pioneered actually worked, though he never lived to perfect them. His student finished what he started. The transformation spawned cults of followers and reshaped the galaxy for generations. Everything the Sith Eternal built, from their cloning science to their patient fleet construction, reflected lessons Plagueis had taught on distant training worlds decades earlier. Yet while all of that was being set in motion, there was a specific window of time when Plagueis was still alive, still in control, and still pulling strings: the Naboo crisis. Sidious ran the visible operation, but his master was never far from the picture, and the Phantom Menace unfolded with a second hand at work behind every move. Darth Plagueis was alive during the Phantom Menace, but you would never know it from watching the film. That is because he never appears on screen, and his name is never spoken. The only Sith shown in the 1999 film are Darth Sidious and Darth Maul, leaving Plagueis completely absent from the story as it unfolds. It is not until Revenge of the Sith that Plagueis is first named, when Palpatine tells Anakin the story of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. That scene confirms he was a real Sith Lord and the former master of Sidious, though some of the powers linked to him are treated as legend rather than proven fact, which means even that moment leaves room for doubt. The most detailed account of what Plagueis did during the Naboo crisis comes from James Luceno's 2012 novel, Darth Plagueis. When Lucasfilm split the old expanded universe from the new canon in April 2014, that book became part of Legends rather than the official story. Because of this, every claim about Plagueis must be labeled by its source. Throughout this video, claims marked as legends come from the Luceno novel, while Canon refers only to the Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith. The first thing Plagueis did was maintain direct control over his apprentice. In the Phantom Menace, Sidious gives orders to the Trade Federation and sends out Maul, all while his public identity as Senator Palpatine works openly as a Naboo politician. Yet on screen, there is no sign of a higher Sith authority, no scene showing anyone commanding him, and no messages hinting that someone else is watching over his actions. As a result, the claim that the Elder Sith held direct control during this time comes only from Legends. The film shows Sidious running everything, so where does Plagueis fit in? In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine confirms that Plagueis was his master. This tells us that the apprentice learned the Sith ways under him, but the timeline is left unclear. The bond between them is confirmed, yet the film does not say whether the master was alive during the Naboo crisis or still giving orders at that time. This gap leaves room for different readings. Some believe Plagueis was long gone by the time of the Phantom Menace, while others argue he was still active behind the scenes. In Legends, the picture changes completely. The Luceno novel states that Plagueis kept authority over his apprentice well into the time frame of the Phantom Menace, with the Elder Sith still serving as the senior figure during the Naboo conflict. According to the book, he approved Palpatine's political plans, allowed him to seek power through the Galactic Senate, and stopped him from revealing Sith ties to anyone outside their circle. Private training between master and apprentice also continued during this period, and the novel presents them as partners working toward a shared goal, even though tensions ran beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the political setting shown in the Phantom Menace supports the idea of a long-term Sith plan working through government rather than open conflict. A crisis on Naboo triggers Senate moves, which end in a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, and Palpatine then rises to power. This path through legal channels fits Sith methods of gaining control without drawing attention, relying on patience rather than force, while using existing systems rather than tearing them down. The second thing Plagueis did was authorize the Naboo operation itself. The Phantom Menace opens with a Trade Federation blockade of Naboo, and that blockade soon grows into a full invasion as the Federation tries to force Queen Amidala into signing a treaty that would make their actions legal. On screen, Sidious serves as the visible commander of the Federation leaders, but no explanation is given for who chose Naboo as the target, or who planned the operation beyond what he is shown doing. Out of thousands of worlds in the Republic, why did the Sith pick this one? The choice seems careful rather than random. Naboo is not just any world caught in a trade fight, but a specific target picked for specific reasons, though the person who made that choice is never named on screen. Someone had to decide that this planet, out of all the worlds in the Republic, would serve the Sith plan best. The trigger for the crisis, as shown in the film's opening crawl, is a Senate decision to tax trade routes in free trade zones. This tax angers the Federation, and Naboo becomes useful because it is a small, well-liked world whose suffering can build support in the Senate. A larger world might resist the blockade, or already have powerful allies, but Naboo needs the Senate to act on its behalf, and that need opens the door for political moves that help Palpatine directly. The blockade builds sympathy for Naboo's senator, while making Chancellor Valorum look weak and unable to respond, which also creates the opening for a vote of no confidence. Every part of the crisis serves one goal: removing Valorum and lifting Palpatine. The chain of events fits together in a way that points to planning rather than chance, where nothing happens by accident, and each step leads naturally to the next. In Legends, Plagueis had personal business reasons for choosing Naboo. The Luceno novel links the planet's value to plasma resources and to his business ties. In that book, he ran company fronts under the name Higo Damask and held power over the linked banking and business world of the Republic, with holdings that gave him access to information and control that most beings never knew existed. His reach stretched across sectors and systems, and Naboo's plasma exports made it worth more than its small size would suggest. The third thing Plagueis did was use the Trade Federation as stand-ins for the Sith. In The Phantom Menace, the Federation serves as the public attacker, with Newt Gunray and the other leaders taking the blame for the blockade and invasion, while Sidious talks to them from a distance, using threats and secrecy to keep control. This arrangement allows business actors to commit the open act, while the Sith stay mostly unseen. The Federation serves as a shield between the true planners and public blame. If the plan fails, the Federation suffers the results, but if it works, the Sith gain the rewards. This setup protects them from being exposed no matter what happens. The Federation had no idea who they were really working for. In the film, the Federation does not seem to grasp the Sith's true goal. They seek gain, protection, or political cover, and they know that they are being directed by a powerful figure, yet they do not know the full size of what they serve. Gunray and his partners are nervous and clearly under pressure from their Sith handler, following orders because they fear what happens if they refuse, rather than because they share a common goal. Their obedience comes from fear, not shared purpose. The film shows Sidious as the one who talks to the Federation, with no sign of Plagueis talking to them at any point. This means the Federation may never have known he existed at all. In Legends, Plagueis spoke to Federation leaders through go-betweens and business channels. Using his cover identity, he was a respected figure in banking and money circles, whose standing gave him access to the Federation through what looked like normal dealings. Once the crisis ended, the Federation became disposable. After the Naboo crisis ends, the Federation faces legal trouble and is tried for its actions, while the Sith face no fallout at all, which is exactly the point of using stand-ins. Whether Plagueis chose not to protect them is addressed only in Legends, where the Luceno novel provides details about his role in handling the Federation ties. The fourth thing Plagueis did was allow the Jedi to get involved in the conflict. In The Phantom Menace, the Jedi Council sends Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi to settle the Naboo blockade, and their arrival quickly speeds up events. When talks fail and the two Jedi are attacked, they must flee with Queen Amidala, and from that point forward, they become active players in a conflict that was meant to run without them. Their entry changes everything. On screen, the Sith do not try to stop Jedi involvement. Instead, Sidious treats their presence as a problem to handle, and his answer is to send Maul. This approach shows the Sith responding to problems rather than stopping them before they start, which suggests they were willing to accept Jedi involvement as long as it did not expose their larger plan. The Jedi could look into things and could even fight, but they could not be allowed to uncover the Sith's role in the crisis. Throughout the film, the Jedi never meet Sidious, but instead meet Maul under unclear conditions, and only later do they figure out the Sith have returned. This delayed discovery gives the Sith time to finish their political moves without being stopped. From a practical view, letting the Jedi work inside the conflict gives useful information. Their methods become visible, their priorities become clear, and their weak points become usable, since the Sith can learn from watching how the Order responds to pressure. In the film, the Jedi show that they focus on protecting the Queen and following Senate rules, that they are willing to act alone when needed, and that they trust in the Force, but can be caught off guard by Sith tactics. All of this is useful to anyone watching closely. In Legends, Plagueis was watching the Jedi the entire time. The Luceno novel shows him as aware of Jedi movements and content to watch rather than to step in directly. According to the book, the Sith had studied Jedi behavior for generations and knew how the Order would respond to a crisis like Naboo. The Jedi's presence creates results that ripple through the rest of the story, since they find Anakin Skywalker, they fight Maul, and they survive to report that a Sith has appeared. Each of these outcomes follows from the first choice to let them enter the conflict, rather than block them at the start. The fifth thing Plagueis did was approve the deployment of Darth Maul. In The Phantom Menace, the Zabrak warrior serves as Sidious's attack dog, sent to chase the Jedi and Queen while fighting Qui-Gon on Tatooine before later facing both him and Obi-Wan on Naboo. He speaks little and acts with purpose since his role is simple: remove obstacles to the Sith plan. He does not ask questions or seek glory, but simply follows orders and carries them out. His visibility is controlled and planned. He works openly only to the small group who meet him in person, allowing the Sith to deny any connection to him, since no one in the Republic government knows he exists, and no one links him to Senator Palpatine. He appears, fights, and fades from public awareness, and the wider galaxy never learns his name during the events of the film. This is by design, allowing him to do the work of the Sith without pointing back to them, like a blade that leaves no trace. The Jedi are forced to face the chance that the Sith have survived, and Maul's fight with the two Jedi forces the Council to rethink what they believed, since the Sith were thought to be gone. His presence proves otherwise, marking a key turning point in the larger story. Was Maul ever meant to be a true Sith? In the movie, his standing as Sith's successor is never stated. The rule of two says there can be only one master and one apprentice. Since Maul served Sidious, this would seem to make him the apprentice's apprentice, rather than a true Sith in line to inherit. When he faced the Jedi alone, no one came to help him. No higher Sith presence steps in during his final fight with the Jedi, so he battles alone, defeats Qui-Gon, but is then bested by Obi-Wan. On screen, Sidious is the one who gives him orders and sets goals. In Legends, Plagueis held final say over Maul's actions as the senior Sith. However, the Luceno novel also shows a layered power balance, where Sidious handled daily work while his master focused on larger goals. His mission marks the shift from hidden political work to open fighting, and the Sith reveal themselves to the Jedi, even if they stay hidden from the Republic. The sixth thing Plagueis did was decide how to handle Qui-Gon Jinn and Anakin Skywalker. In The Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon is a senior Jedi who acts on his own at key moments during the Naboo crisis, finding Anakin on Tatooine and insisting on bringing the boy to Coruscant for Jedi testing. This makes him unusually important for the long-term path of the galaxy, since his choices during the Naboo crisis set events in motion that would shape the future of the entire Jedi Order. Without him, Anakin might never have left Tatooine. Did Plagueis know about Anakin? And if so, what did he plan to do about it? In the film, Qui-Gon saw something special in Anakin and believed the boy might be the chosen one spoken of in the Jedi prophecy. This belief led him to push the Jedi Council to accept the boy for training, even when they raised concerns, and he would not let the matter rest. Canon remains silent on any orders Plagueis gave about Qui-Gon's fate. Sidious is the shown commander who sends Maul, and the assassin was sent to deal with the Jedi as a group rather than to target one of them alone. The same limit applies to the boy. On screen, no one talks about him as a target since Sidious and Maul focus on the Queen and the Jedi who protect her, while Anakin is not part of their stated task. In Legends, Plagueis noticed Anakin immediately and chose to wait rather than act. The Luceno novel describes Plagueis becoming aware of Anakin's unusual Force presence. Because the Sith Lord had long sought to create life through the Force, the appearance of a boy with no father raised questions he could not set aside. The novel suggests the Sith took an interest in the boy, but did not move against him at this stage, since patience held more value than quick action. With Qui-Gon gone, Obi-Wan becomes the boy's master, and the bond that grows between them shapes the path of the Clone Wars and beyond. The young Kenobi was not his former master, since he trained Anakin in a different way and related to him in a different way, and these gaps would matter greatly in the years ahead. The seventh and final thing Plagueis did was oversee the outcome of the entire crisis. The Phantom Menace ends with Palpatine elected Supreme Chancellor after the vote of no confidence in Valorum succeeded. The Naboo crisis created the perfect conditions for him to rise to the highest office in the galaxy. The blockade, the invasion, the Queen's flight to Coruscant, and her emotional speech before the Senate all served a single purpose. Palpatine now holds the highest office in the Republic, and he gained this power without anyone knowing his true nature. To the Senate, he looked like a victim of events who rose to meet the moment, while to the Jedi, he seemed like a politician they could work with. The Sith plan worked perfectly, and no one in the galaxy had any idea. The Jedi confirmed that a Sith appeared during the crisis, yet the Sith Order stays hidden as a group, and the Republic does not treat it as a public enemy. The Council debates whether the Master or the Apprentice remains, but they do not know the answer, and the audience is left with the same question. What happened to Plagueis after the film ended? The opera scene in Revenge of the Sith tells us he existed and was Sidious's former master, but it does not clearly state when he met his end compared to the Naboo crisis, leaving the question open. In Legends, Plagueis survives through the Phantom Menace. The Luceno novel places his final moments shortly after Palpatine's election, with that timing placing his end at the very end of, or just after, the film's story window. In the novel, the apprentice makes his move on the night before he is set to become Chancellor, and the book frames this as the finish of his own Sith training, where he overcomes the Master. However, this is strictly from the Luceno novel and is not part of the official canon. The film ends with the Sith remaining in the shadows as the Republic moves forward, unaware of what has already begun. But those shadows were about to close in on Plagueis himself. The same night Palpatine was set to become Supreme Chancellor, the greatest victory the Sith had achieved in 1,000 years, his master sat celebrating in a penthouse above Coruscant, drinking rare wine, with no idea that the celebration had already been designed as a trap. When Palpatine finally ended his Sith master, he did far more than commit a single act of betrayal. On that night in 32 BBY, the future Emperor overthrew 1,000 years of Sith beliefs while using the methods he would later use against the Jedi, and completing a ritual change that would reshape the galaxy forever. Drawing from both canon and legend sources, 6 critical actions took place when Darth Sidious turned against Darth Plagueis, and each one reveals something important about the man who would become Emperor. First, he lured his master into a false celebration and slowly weakened his defenses throughout the evening. The timing of this action was no accident and carried deep meaning for the Sith tradition that stretched back 1,000 years. James Luceno's novel, Darth Plagueis, reveals that the attack took place on the night before Palpatine was elected Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. This was 32 BBY, and the political crisis on Naboo had been created specifically to push the Senator into the highest political office in the galaxy. The Sith had started a war and tragedy across the entire planet to create this moment, and now two rises to power would occur within hours of each other. One would be public and celebrated across the Republic, while the other remained hidden in darkness. Yet the setting itself created a dark meaning for what was about to unfold. Plagueis had chosen his fancy penthouse apartment in the Kaldani Spires residential apartment building on Coruscant for their celebration of the coming victory. The building towered above the surrounding cityscape, and the penthouse offered views of the Senate district where Palpatine would be crowned Chancellor by morning. The dwelling belonged to Higo Damask, which was the public entity Plagueis had built as a Muun banker and financial power broker over many decades of careful work. This penthouse stood for everything the Sith Lord had built through patient scheming, including his wealth and political network, and a carefully built empire of influence. The relationships with senators and corporate leaders, and the invisible threads connecting the banking clan to 1,000 other groups would all belong to someone else before morning. Sidious gave Plagueis Celestin wine throughout the evening, and as the night wore on, the Sith Master became more and more drunk, and his defenses began to weaken. Meanwhile, the apprentice practiced the words of his public victory while planning his private one. Sidious practiced his acceptance speech for the chancellorship many times, while Plagueis listened and offered his thoughts on how to address the Senate. He refined the phrases and adjusted the tone because he wanted every word perfect for the moment when the Senate would recognize him as its leader. All the while, he was planning the private victory that would come first. The guard of Plagueis lowered, and his awareness dulled because he trusted his apprentice completely after decades of working together toward this moment. They had schemed side by side against the Jedi, the Republic, and the galaxy itself, and the Muun believed they shared a bond that went beyond the traditional Sith relationship of suspicion and certain betrayal. This trust would prove to be his deadly mistake, because the dark side had already chosen his replacement. Eventually, Plagueis fell asleep, and the dark side of the Force called to the Senator of Naboo to take his place as the ruling Sith Lord. Second, he attacked with deadly accuracy the moment his master fell asleep. Sidious targeted the specific weakness that would make fighting back impossible. The moment had arrived after years of patient waiting and careful planning. He struck with powerful force lightning that destroyed the breathing device Plagueis had been forced to wear since surviving a Maladian attempt on his life in 52 BBY. Without the breathing device working properly, the Muun began to suffocate while his apprentice watched, and what followed was darkly ironic in ways that would echo through Sith history for generations to come. The Sith Lord, who had given his existence to beating the end of life, who had spent decades studying midi-chlorian control and the secrets of living forever, now choked on his last breaths while his apprentice watched. Palpatine struck him with force lightning and choked every last bit of air out of his master. He continued his attack until he was certain Plagueis had passed, because there would be no recovery, no trick, and no survival this time. The method itself was important and revealed much about the future Emperor's character and his approach to removing obstacles. There was no warning, no trial, and no fight between equals. The attack came while Plagueis slept, striking him when he was most open and showing how Sidious would later ambush the Jedi. Even in victory, Sidious hesitated and feared his mentor might have outsmarted him because of his knowledge of life and what came after. The answer involves a cruel irony that speaks to the nature of the dark side itself. The Legends novel shows that the Force had basically abandoned Plagueis due to his experiments with the midi-chlorians and his desire to bend the will of the Force by making life last longer. His scientific approach to the dark side had created a distance between himself and the very power he sought to master through research. Plagueis also suffered from physical limits that came with his injuries. The Maladian attackers, who had come after him 20 years earlier, had left him needing the breathing device that Sidious destroyed with his opening strike. Even if Plagueis had woken in time, his body was weakened in ways that would have made fighting back difficult, against a prepared and ruthless attacker. Third, he delivered a crushing speech that revealed his true feelings about their entire relationship. As the Muun lay struggling for breath, Sidious spoke words that exposed decades of hidden anger and planned manipulation. He called his master a useless old fool and recounted their entire history together with brutal honesty. It was Higo Damask as Darth Plagueis who came to Naboo to exploit the planet's plasma and set the Trade Federation up as its overseers. It was Plagueis who set his sights on a seemingly confused young man and, with careful skill, pushed him into ending his father, mother, and siblings. The apprentice continued his verbal attack without mercy because it was Plagueis who took him as an apprentice, sharing some knowledge but keeping the most powerful secrets and denying him his wishes as a way to control him while filling him with deadly rage and turning him to the dark side. It was the master who criticized the early efforts of his apprentice and who once choked him to show who was stronger. Whether these accusations were entirely true or merely excuses, they revealed how Sidious saw every part of their relationship as control that he now returned in kind. Yet even in this moment of betrayal, Sidious recognized his master's role in his rise. Even all that the Muun had taught him might not have been enough to take the final steps to the chancellorship without help in controlling the Senate and bringing into play various allies across the galaxy. Plagueis had used his identity as Higo Damask to open doors that the senator from Naboo could never have opened alone. The banking clan, the Trade Federation, and corporate leaders across dozens of systems all came from connections the master had grown over decades. Sidious admitted he could not have succeeded without his master, and this admission revealed the truth about their entire relationship. Sidious had taken knowledge, resources, and political power first, and drained everything useful from his master before throwing him away. The partnership had always been temporary from one side at least, because Plagueis saw a partner, while Sidious saw a stepping stone to greater power. Sidious saw the openness of Plagueis as a weakness and used it throughout their entire relationship. In his speech, he accused the Muun of sharing some knowledge, but keeping the most powerful secrets, and claimed his master had denied him his wishes as a way to control him. Fourth, he openly rejected the vision of Plagueis for shared rule and restored the traditional Sith path. This action was not simply about power, because it was about beliefs and the future of the Sith Order itself. Plagueis had spent decades trying to reshape what it meant to be Sith, and Sidious rejected every part of that vision in a single night of violence. The Secrets of the Sith explains that Plagueis taught his apprentice that 2 Sith were required for their dangerous schemes. If they worked together following the rule of 2 by Darth Bane, they would succeed in controlling the full power of the dark side and rule forever for 10,000 years. The Darth Plagueis novel describes how the Muun promised to break the cycle of betrayal entirely and create something new in Sith history. Although the training would be hard, the master assured his apprentice that they would be free of the rule of 2 and its requirement that one must fall for the other to rise. They would neither keep any secrets from each other, nor feel any jealousy or distrust in their relationship. They would serve the dark side together as equals in power and purpose, and partnership would replace fear in this new vision of what the Sith could become. However, Plagueis went even further by attempting something rarely achieved in Force history. Inspired by the doctrine of the Dyad, he tried to create a powerful bond with Sidious that would have been a unique Force bond as strong as life itself. Such a connection would make betrayal impossible because their fates would be linked together forever. However, Plagueis was unable to form the Dyad despite his great power, and his failure convinced Sidious that his master was not worthy of the task. The difference between master and apprentice was basic and impossible to bridge from the very beginning. Plagueis wanted to live forever because he believed the secret lay in science and wanted to escape the rule of 2 through eternal life. If both Sith Lords lived forever, neither needed to pass for the other to advance. Sidious chose a different path entirely because he embraced replacement, and he betrayed and destroyed his Sith master to train his own Sith apprentice, Darth Maul, because the rule of two limited their ranks to 2 Sith Lords at any given time. In his speech, Sidious openly rejected the shared rule model with words that revealed his true nature, declaring that now that they had won the race, he did not need a partner, because the presence of his master and unnecessary advice would only confuse matters. The words were meant to hurt, because the apprentice was not just ending his master, but rejecting the entire way of thinking. He had never planned to share power, and had only pretended to accept the vision while planning to restore the traditional Sith path. One Sith believed the future meant ending the cycle of betrayal forever, while the other believed the cycle was the point. Plagueis wanted change, but Sidious wanted tradition, and tradition won that night in the penthouse above Coruscant. Fifth, he completed the ritual change as the dark side proclaimed his reign through a tremor that shook Coruscant. The doubt Sidious experienced passed quickly, and in its place came a dramatic shift in the Force that the new Sith Master experienced as a moment where the dark side would control him as much as he would control it. Then a tremor took hold of Coruscant itself, as if the planet recognized what had just occurred in that penthouse. Sprung from this act, the dark side released itself in a powerful wave across the planet, and at the center of the quake stood Sidious alone with the body of his former master. A rush of voices from near and far, and from present and ages past, filled his thoughts, and those voices proclaimed his reign and cheered the start of a new order that would reshape the galaxy. Following the tradition of the Sith Order, the apprentice had completed his dark side training by ending his master through the path Darth Bane had set up 1,000 years before. Each generation of Sith proved its worth by beating and destroying the previous one in an endless cycle of replacement. Around the same time as his election to Supreme Chancellor, Sidious betrayed and took the life of Plagueis and claimed the role of Sith Master for himself. Political and Sith changes aligned perfectly as one identity ended and another began. The Empire existed in form before it existed in name, because Sidious had taken over the financial empire of Plagueis through Damask Holdings, and all the setup of imperial power was already in place, while the announcement would come later. Remarkably, this mirrored what happened to the master of Plagueis years before. The Legends novel shows that when Darth Plagueis took the life of Darth Tenebrous, the Force called out to him in a similarly uncertain way that the moment had come, and he should claim his stake to the dark side. Tenebrous had been a Bith Sith Lord who focused on building things, including starships, weapons, and plans that stretched across decades. He had trained Plagueis in the ways of the dark side while doing his own secret experiments in midi-chlorian control. When Plagueis struck him down in a collapsed mineshaft, Tenebrous believed his mind would survive through his research. But he was wrong, and his apprentice took everything he had built. The same call that raised Plagueis now raised Sidious as the dark side spoke to one generation of the Sith and then spoke the same words to the next. But the novel makes an important point about choice that defines the Sith path. The Force only advised because it neither controlled actions nor guided hands, and that was the doing of Sidious alone, because the dark side whispered opportunity when the apprentice chose to seize it. The responsibility belonged to Sidious, and not to some mystical command. His final words to the dying Plagueis made his plans clear beyond any doubt or question. He promised that he would be proclaimed emperor and that the Sith would have their revenge, and he would rule the galaxy. This was not pride or empty boasting, but prophecy and a statement of absolute certainty about events already set in motion through decades of careful planning. Sixth, he took everything his master had built and immediately set the grand plan into motion. With Plagueis gone, Sidious did not just gain the title of master, but acquired major assets, as Canon sources confirm. He took over 11-4D, the late Sith Lord's many-limbed assistant droid, along with the studies of Plagueis, including deep research into the biological foundations of life and midi-chlorian control. These studies contained decades of experiments and observations that Plagueis had gathered in his quest to beat mortality. Sidious would later use this research in his own experiments, including the creation of clone bodies on Exegol, and he took control of Damask Holdings and its vast financial network. Every asset Plagueis had built over decades now belonged to Sidious alone, and the secret replacement was already in place and had been for years without the Muun ever suspecting the depth of the betrayal. Legends lore establishes that Sidious had trained Darth Maul without the full knowledge or approval of Plagueis, which was a direct breaking of the understanding between master and apprentice. The rule of two meant exactly two Sith Lords, and by training Maul in secret, Sidious had created a third while breaking the very tradition that Plagueis sought to escape. Sidious had planned his betrayal from the beginning because Maul would do what the risk of discovery might not allow Sidious to do himself, and the apprentice had always planned to beat and replace his master. With cold precision, Sidious then outlined his plans to the dying Plagueis. He had Maul perform tasks while he executed the rest of the grand plan that included growing an army in secret, starting rebellion across the galaxy, making up intergalactic war between fake factions, and surrounding the Jedi while catching them unaware. The methods he described would later become the Clone Wars, Order 66, and the Jedi would occupy the same position of trust and blindness that Plagueis had occupied. As Chancellor of the Republic and Dark Lord of the Sith, Palpatine would start the terrible Clone Wars 10 years after the Naboo crisis. Legend sources reveal that he himself headed both the Galactic Republic and, secretly, the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Victory and defeat were equally meaningless when one person controlled all the pieces, and in the wake of the Naboo crisis, the Galactic Senate voted to elect Palpatine as Supreme Chancellor because the crisis had been created by the Sith specifically to push him into the highest political office in the Republic. Chancellor Valorum had been ruined through the control of trade disputes and government failures that the Sith had planned behind the scenes. Now the office would have an unseen second occupant in the Dark Lord of the Sith, and the Republic had elected its future destroyer without ever knowing the true nature of the man they had chosen. The pattern would repeat throughout the reign of Sidious as apprentices became tools to be used and replaced when no longer useful, and the only difference was that Plagueis learned it first and learned it last. When a tool broke or became unnecessary, another took its place without pause, and Sidious showed this lesson painfully to Count Dooku by ordering his end at the hands of Anakin Skywalker. Later, he made sure Darth Vader understood the same system. Apprentices were never equals, never fully trusted, and always tools to be shaped, tested, and replaced. From Plagueis, Sidious learned that closeness invited betrayal, so he kept Vader isolated, uncertain, and hungry for approval, offering praise rarely and punishment frequently. Knowledge and power were held back on purpose, secrets kept to ensure he remained needed, and fear was his constant tool for control. Every apprentice learned that their role was never a partnership, but usefulness, and their ambitions were always less important than his plans. This lesson shaped decades of the rule of Sidious, ensuring that no one ever felt safe enough to challenge him, and that his apprentices remained nothing more than tools in his endless pursuit of power. The central irony of the demise of Plagueis is stated directly in canon sources that describe what made it a tragedy. He could not save himself from his end despite being able to save others because he had gained power over life and could influence the midi-chlorians to create life and prevent others from passing. Yet when his own moment came, all that knowledge meant nothing, and the tale ended by saying that Plagueis became so powerful that the only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which he did. The fear became prophecy. In truth, the Empire was born on that night, even though the galaxy would not learn of it for over a decade. With Plagueis gone, Sidious was now the sole Dark Lord of the Sith, and legend sources confirm that no rival, partner, or limit remained. There was clarity now, with one Sith, one vision, and one path forward toward galactic control. The body of Plagueis was never recovered by the authorities, and no public record of his end was ever filed. Ego Damask simply vanished from galactic affairs, and his business partners assumed he had retired or moved away. The banking clan continued to operate under new leadership, never suspecting that its founder had been ended by his own apprentice. Sidious had erased his master from existence as completely as if Plagueis had never lived at all. The tremor in the force that shook Coruscant marked something the galaxy could not yet understand, and the voices from ages past proclaimed his reign and cheered the start of a new order because the Sith had worked in shadow for 1,000 years. By morning, the senator from Naboo would address the Republic as its new chancellor. But the true crowning had already happened alone in a penthouse apartment over the body of the last obstacle to absolute power. Everything Plagueis built, every experiment, every scheme, every apprentice he shaped, all of it existed within a framework one Sith Lord created 1,000 years before him. Darth Bane wrote the rules that Plagueis lived and died by, and the complete Sith lineage that followed tells a story darker than any single master or apprentice. Both are on the channel. Be sure to watch them next.